Story Brothers born in. Once upon a time, there was a couple who only had one daughter. That's why they raise and educate them very carefully. When the girl grew up, her parents taught her the way of saints and sages. When she was 15 years old, she was still forbidden from contacting outsiders. One day the mother went to the temple to worship Buddha. The first time she took her daughter out of the house. At that time, there was an angel who wanted to borrow the virgin girl as a place to be reincarnated. When the girl went to the garden to visit, she became a beautiful flower with 5 petals. The girl liked it so much that she picked it and looked at it for a long time, then suddenly put it in her mouth and swallowed it. From then on, the girl suddenly became pregnant without a husband. Her parents were surprised and extremely embarrassed. After questioning and seducing, the innocent girl was unable to understand. All parents' suspicions focused on the temple. Guessing that a monk had seduced his daughter on a Buddha's day, they chased her to the temple and said, "You go up there and stay with the monk. Don't come back and dishonor my family again." The monk in charge of that temple didn't know what to do. He couldn't bear to send her away. He had to adopt her and build a hut behind the temple for her to live there. When it was almost time to give birth, the girl suddenly dreamed that an angel came to her and told her, "Don't name your child yet. Just wait until they know how to speak and they will tell the name themselves." Then, the girl gave birth to 5 sons at once, especially with identical faces. All 5 are growing up so fast, each one is strong and healthy. When they could talk, the mother asked their name, and the first child answered, "Your strength can carry a mountain, you are strong." The second child said, "Even if you have a knife and a hammer, you will not die. You are made of iron and skin." The third child continued, "I can sit in one place and know everything in the world. My name is lifting the clouds to see the ceiling." The fourth child, "I can live in water as well as on land. My name is Ko." The last child said, "Even if I sleep in a fire, I still feel comfortable as usual. My name is Wet. Growing up, I worked to take care of my mother." Every day, Strong goes to the forest to collect firewood to exchange for rice. Each of his loads of firewood filled a yard. His reputation spread everywhere in the country. At that time, the king needed a lot of firewood for a very solemn royal ceremony. The king summoned Man, told him to find firewood for him and promised that for every load of firewood he brought, he would exchange it for a load of rice. "Be strong and find firewood as quickly as lightning." Although the forest was far away, every day he went back and forth countless times. Each time he brought firewood and carried rice. So much so that when the official in charge of the rice warehouse showed the king that the rice warehouse was more than half empty, he rushed to inform the king. The king said, "Then we have to kill him." Then he sent Man to come and said, "You must be tired working like that. I'll go home and rest. I'll be here in 10 days to serve my mission. Be strong in telling stories to your brothers." Lifting the clouds to see the ceiling, he already read the bad thoughts in the king's mind, so he told Ko to go instead of Man. 10 days later, Ko came to see the king. The king thought he was the guy carrying his rice warehouse the other day. So he immediately yelled at the soldiers to arrest him and drown him in the tank to die. Ko just let the soldiers capture him, tie him up and drown him in the water, but the first time he was dragged out, Ko was still alive. After being drowned the second or third time, Ko still happily sang. They drowned him again, but no matter how they drowned him, they could not kill him. Angry and afraid of the king's fate, they built a cage and put Dry in it along with many rocks and ropes to drop to the bottom of the sea, but a few weeks later they picked him up and found him alive as usual. Finally, they had to bring him back to tell the story to the king. The king had not found a way to kill him, so he told him to go home and promised to come back in 10 days. The king knew that this time the king would use poison to burn him to death, so he told Yuo to go instead. When it was wet, the king ordered a separate wooden house built behind the garden, surrounded by firewood. The king also thought Yuo was the guy from the other day, so he invited him upstairs to prepare a tray full of wine and delicious food for him to eat. Then he told the soldiers to close everything and set it on fire. Fire was burning everywhere. But wet, I still sit in one place, cupping my spleen and spleen. And when the door fell down, he called out for them to hear, "Oh, it's so cool here." The king shook his head, not knowing how to kill him, so he told him to go home and come back 10 days later. This time, lift the clouds and say, "Let's go with Iron Skin." When this guy arrived, the king shouted at the executioner to bring him out and be beheaded. But no matter how many swords touched his body, he writhed and could not kill him. The angry executioner stabbed the spear into his armpit. He just laughed and howled as if someone had tickled him. Seeing this, the king was very upset, jumped down, pulled out the scabbard, held it with both hands and slashed it very hard, but said the sword only broke in half and nothing happened to the sinner. Finally, the king told him to go home and come back in 10 days. Seeing that he had miraculously collected firewood, this time the king did not intend to harm him anymore. Plucking the Clouds knew the plan, so 10 days later he and the other 4 people led each other to the capital. The king saw that all 5 brothers looked exactly alike. When he asked about them, he found out that they were all children of angels. The king led Van Kant to the throne, gave him his place and married his son, then left to become a monk. Scary, the above story has a different narrator. A man took turns marrying 100 wives without children, and in the end he only gave birth to 1 girl. When he died, his father told his son to have sex with 100 different men to avenge what he had done the other day. The son obeyed, and after a while she had 99 lovers. One day a god appeared to her in the form of a leper. At night, the girl willingly offered herself to the 100th man. But the leper only put his finger on her belly. The girl then naturally became pregnant and gave birth to 5 sons at the same time. They are healthy and big as hell. The first child has a body of copper and iron. The second child has a lot of ingenuity. The third child has a keen ear and can hear the words of people far away. The fourth child can live underwater and the last child can go into boiling water and fire without dying. Both mother and child live in the deep forest. One day, the king posted a sign promising that whoever could kill the troublesome Mrs. Gunn in the area would marry the princess. The third child, thanks to his good ears, found where Mrs. Kang lived, so he told the guy with iron skin and the clever guy to go and eliminate Mrs. Kang. Sure enough, they found the place, and after several fierce battles, killed Mrs. Kang, cut off her head and brought it to the king. When placing the head on the dragon's yard, the head naturally recedes into the ground. The king pretended to praise her and told them to come tomorrow morning and marry her daughter. Just like the story above, the guy with good ears knew the king's bad intentions, so he told him to go ahead. I came with iron and skin, and the king ordered me to arrest him and behead him. He couldn't cut it, so the king sent him back and told him to come again tomorrow morning. The next morning, the fourth person arrived and was captured and thrown into the sea but did not die. The next morning a fifth person arrived and was burned alive, but it was still no good. The last time the guy with good ears came, the king married the princess to him. The Mio people have a story called 9 Talented Men. A wife was scolded by her husband because she was old but had never been pregnant. One day she was so sad that she ran to the forest. When I met the fairy gave me 9 thick cakes to eat, one each year. Unexpectedly, I brought home a delicious bowl of socks. After that, she gave birth to 9 healthy sons at once. Meeting the fairy a second time and asking about the child's name, the fairy said, "The first child should be named Listen to the Wind, the second child should be named High Pushing the Beam, the third child should be named Dad Carrying a Knife, the fourth child should be named Two Skinning, the fifth child should be named Year Harrowing the Fields. 6 is 6 with a big belly, 7 is 7 with long legs, 8 is 8 pounding a mortar, 9 is 9 making wine." Soon the cubs grew up. One day, I heard from the wind that the king was building a palace, so he sent Hai to help the king. He carried the beam in his hand and pushed it up, unexpectedly causing the house to collapse. The king ordered him to be detained and be beheaded the next day. The wind knew, so he sent Ba's sister to secretly go instead of him. Soldiers cut meat all day long and he had nothing to do. He was sent to prison again so that tomorrow he could peel the skin and stuff it with buffalo. Hearing the wind, I sent 2 to replace him. The soldiers peel off as much skin as they grow. Again ordered to be detained to be thrown to the buffalo. It's Mr. Nam's turn to take over. The king ordered him to be tied to 3 buffaloes so they could drag him around all day. The buffaloes were tired and he had nothing to do. He also pulled one and 3 buffaloes collided and died. The king ordered them to be detained again, and tomorrow they would slaughter all 3 animals and catch them all. Mr. Sao came over with a big belly, ate the whole thing but still seemed hungry. The king ordered him to be detained again. Tomorrow he would be taken away and thrown into the abyss. It was Bai's turn to tiptoe around in the water that had not yet wet the hem of his pants. He was ordered to be detained again to put it in a mortar and grind it. 8 mortars arrived. The king ordered them to be put into the mortar, and it took 9 people to step on the pestles to lift them. After a day's work, your legs will be tired. Again ordered to be detained to make wine tomorrow. Cooking wine was put in a pot under the fire, and he took the hemp rope he brought with him to weave. When the soldiers opened the bag, he had woven 99 delicate pieces and walked out, surprising the soldiers. When the king agreed to be talented, Listen to the Wind brought his 8 younger brothers. The king ceded the throne to him, too. Chinese story. An old woman had 5 identical sons, each with a strange talent. The first child can swallow the ocean, the second child has skin as hard as steel, the third child has legs that can stretch indefinitely, the fourth child can burn without burning fire, the fifth child cannot breathe. But still alive. For a long time, No one in the neighborhood knew that they were talented. The neighbors saw that the eldest brother always caught a lot of fish, so one day they asked him to teach the children how to catch fish for food. He took them to the beach and, after swallowing the sea, signaled them to go down and catch the stranded fish. The children were too engrossed, so when he was tired, he signaled them to quickly go ashore, but they still didn't know. Finally, he couldn't bear it anymore, he had to vomit out sea water, and so the children all drowned. Although he tried his best to explain, the children's parents kept dragging him to court. He was sentenced to be beheaded. Before carrying out the sentence, he was allowed to go home and say goodbye to his elderly mother. But when he stepped onto the execution ground, it was his second brother who went instead, so the knife couldn't penetrate. After that, the judge ordered the sinner thrown into the sea and the third brother took his place. As soon as his legs entered the water, he immediately grew longer, and his head always floated above the waves. People used the cauldron torture again, then the fourth brother came to replace him. He pretended to be cold and told them to gather fire. Finally, people came up with a way to put the sinner in a giant cake and stew until he suffocated, but at this time the fifth child came to replace him, still unharmed. Ultimately acquitted. 3. See more of the story Four Talented Men, No. 66, below. 1. According to Lands. Book cited. 2. According to Vo Quang Enhan. Mr. Dam T. 3. According to Casqueen, Indian and Western Fairy Tales, cited. Thank you for joining us for today's fairy tale. We hope these stories bring joy and meaning to your day. If you love our channel, please hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any exciting tales. Wishing you a good night and sweet dreams. See you in the next story.